Aloha, everybody, and welcome to the Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones, broadcasting from the beautiful hill country of Texas. I think this will be the last show not in a studio. So we apologize for the lighting. We apologize for the sound. Even with good lighting, I'm still not going to be that handsome. I'm sorry for that. Nothing I can do about that. But I do want to say we've been moving, and our new studio will be ready in a week. And we're new at the video shows after like many, many, many years of audio shows. And so we need to move it into a studio because we need better quality. All right. I'm actually heading to Los Angeles next week. As you know, I also make movies. We have 2 films that are tearing up the film festival circuit right now, and another film in production, and I'm going to meet with distributors. But I raced to get this show in at the last minute because there is an uptick in the persecution of Christians around the world. It is as if Satan is furiously working to tear apart the mystical body of Christ. From India to Nigeria, from the West Bank to China. And so there's no better person in the world to talk to about the subject of Christian persecution than Nina Shea from the Hudson Institute. Nina Shea is a good friend of mine. Her bio is very long, but I just want to let you know that she is a senior fellow and director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute. She is a human rights lawyer. Ms. Shea was appointed to the U.S. House of Representatives to serve as commissioner on the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom 7 times. 7 times. It is not hyperbole or exaggeration to say that no one has done more than Nina Shea to advocate and advance religious liberty around the world. There are others that stand shoulder to shoulder with Nina Shea. There are other great stalwarts and great heroes, but there is no one who has done more, that is alive on this planet breathing. So I'm excited that we get to interview Nina today on what's happening in China, what's happening in Nigeria, and happening around the world. But before I do that, you need to know this show, like all of our shows, is being brought to you by the Vulnerable People Project. Our mission is to stand in solidarity with the most vulnerable people in the world, from the child in the womb to Christians in Nigeria, the Yazidi in Iraq, the Uyghur and Chinese-occupied East Turkestan, Christians in India. You'll find VPP there. Go to our website, vulnerablepeopleproject.com, and look around. Go look at what we do. And we cannot do it with our donors. So to those of you who are donors, thank you very much. For those of you who are not, go look at our website. Look at what we do. I know you're going to be a part of our team. So go to vulnerablepeopleproject.com and look around, click on that donor link, and together we will stand in solidarity with the most vulnerable people in the world when the world has walked away. All right, now for my interview with the great Nina Shea on the Jason Jones Show. Aloha, Nina Shea. Welcome to the Jason Jones Show.
Great to be with you, Jason. Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's been a while. So I'm really grateful to have you on. Yesterday I was at Mass. My favorite day of the week to go to Mass, I try to go to daily Mass, is Wednesday, because at my local parish at 8 a.m. on Wednesday, it's the school Mass. So there are all these elementary school kids, and they were singing, "We are one body in Christ." And I was thinking of the persecuted church. I was thinking of the Christians in Nigeria, the Christians in Syria, in Egypt, in Iraq, and India now with the rise of Hindu extremism. And the latest uptick in brazen brutality against the church by the CCP. And you have been for decades now an advocate for the persecuted church. Can you share with us what's happening in China, and why is it so hard for us to capture the attention of Christians for the suffering of our fellow believers around the world?
Yeah, that's a question that I have pondered for decades too, Jason. I don't know. It's it's searing persecution. What we're seeing in the countries that you mentioned, in some of those countries, China, for example, has, by my documentation, about 9 Catholic bishops who are either in detention or have disappeared in China. And I name them, I give their pictures, I give their histories. It's on our website at hudson.org, HUDSON.org, under my expert page, Nina Shea. Yet no one is really aware of this. They're not talking about it. They know that it exists, but they don't want to talk about it. And the same goes for a place like Nigeria, where there are thousands, tens of thousands of Christians who have been murdered for their faith. Open Doors, which is a very respected research group for Christians on persecution, says that it's the most deadly place in the world for Christians, that more Christians have died for their faith in recent years than all other places in the world combined. Yet we're now embroiled in this massive struggle right now in Washington to get the U.S. to designate Nigeria as a country of particular concern under the International Religious Freedom Act. And there's a great resistance to it because there's no one wants to be on the short list of the world's worst persecutors. Yet this government, which has not actually carried out this killing, also doesn't lift a finger to help these Christians. It simply lets others do the dirty work for them, Muslim extremists in that case. And they kill other Muslims too, but usually the Muslims are killed by the extreme terror groups. And they are in Boko Haram and ISIS and Al-Qaeda link groups. And the government of Nigeria is fighting against them. But the groups that are, the Fulani group that is particularly targeting Christians, the government does not lift a finger.
Can you explain the difference for those of us? Can you explain the difference between the Fulani and Boko Haram?
Well, Boko Haram is an organized group with manifestos and political agendas, and they try to join ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and ISIS rejected them, and it's partly over this issue of whether to kill other Muslims or not who don't buy into your agenda. So the Fulani militias are nomadic herders who used to have a caliphate in the early 19th century in Nigeria, and who have a nostalgic longing to recreate that caliphate, but they are not linked, as far as we know, to these other terror groups. So they're not designated, they're not considered a terror group. They are a radicalized group. But nevertheless, they are killing Christians with impunity. And they go in
we lost an employee at the Vulnerable People Project in July. We provide security for Catholic institutions and the last synagogue in Nigeria. And one of our security guards, while trying to protect 3 seminarians, was murdered.
Yeah, that's true. The priests and seminarians and pastors are particularly targeted, individually targeted, or targeted as in their rectories and in their seminaries. I'm very sorry. It happens all the time. Unfortunately, our Aid to the Church in Need has a list of about 100 Catholic priests and pastors who've been kidnapped, and many of them murdered. There was just this month a Protestant pastor who was kidnapped by the Fulani. His church paid the ransom for him, and they killed him anyhow, and his body was found. Pastor Isa. So this is a continuing problem. It's systematic. The bishops I have spoken to from Benue province, which is Benue state in Nigeria, which is a very Christian state, and has been particularly hard hit. He told me that this is a coordinated effort. It's systematic. It appears to be a land grab for the purposes of eradicating the Christian presence to Islamicize the area. And I've heard that from others as well. And it sure looks like that. Fulani come into a village, a Christian village in June, they came into Yellow Water. It got international headlines. Secretary Rubio, the Pope prayed for it. Secretary Rubio commented on it. The Pope publicly prayed for it in Rome. That situation. The Fulani raided it at night and slaughtered 270 plus Christians who were sleeping. And it was in the middle of the night on a weekend. And these Christians who were slaughtered were actually displaced from their own villages where they had been attacked. The Bishop of Benue, McCurdy Diocese, came to Washington. Congressman Chris Smith had him testify before the Africa Subcommittee. In March, I also testified in that committee. And he spoke of these incidents that were happening about this land grab and Islamization. And he went back, and his own home village was then attacked. Probably, we think in retribution for his testimony before U.S. Congress. 12 of his relatives were murdered, brutally murdered, and he sent me their names. I have them. So I know it's real. And, his head of his Justice and Peace director, a priest, a Nigerian priest, was so seriously threatened at that time that he had to seek another post, which he did outside of Nigeria, at least for a few years until it cools down. So it's a two-part problem. It's the Fulani radicals who are doing this to the Christian. And these Christians are living in rural villages, in they're farm families. And the other part of it is, and they yell Allahu Akbar, which is the war cry, the holy war cry. And
no, isn't that what farmers say? I thought that was just a farmer saying.
Yeah, no, this is a holy war cry by jihadis. And so these Fulani come in on motorcycles, they swarm into a village, Christian village, they have AKs, and these are cattle herders that are destitute, they're nomadic.
Why does our establishment want to say that this is a struggle between farmers and herders? Why don't they want to acknowledge the truth? We sit on, and I want to get to China. I'm glad we're talking about it. I want to get to Pastor Virginia. But is it just powerful special interests, economic interests that would be hurt by placing Nigeria on this on the list of countries of special concern? What's
that's that's the conversation in Washington right now, Jason, because it's a myth that if you get so first of all, there's a U.S. law that requires the president review every country every year, every foreign country, and determine whether it's an egregious persecutor or not on religious freedom. And we do that because religious freedom is a pillar of U.S. foreign policy. The law sets out a set of actions if it's determined to be a CPC, a country of particular concern, for egregious persecution. And those actions can be as mild as a day march, which is just a complaint registered by the U.S. government, to working with the government to solve the problem, to sanctions, but it does not in any way require sanctions. There is a great fear on the parts of some in the church and some certainly in the government of Nigeria that it would be made a pariah, that there'd be sanctions. That's not likely. In fact, in most cases, a CPC, there are no economic sanctions specifically because of religious persecution. There might be sanctions because they're openly supporting terror too. But that would not happen because the United States is very engaged. It's very unlikely to happen that there be sanctions because the U.S. is very engaged with Nigeria on fighting, helping them fight the terror groups in the north, the designated terror groups in the north, like Boko Haram and ISIS. So we would no doubt continue that. And we really don't give them much aid anymore. They buy our weapons. We don't give them military aid of hardware, military hardware. So there is that fear. There's a myth. It's a misconception. It's been fanned by certain quarters. There's also fear, Jason. I mean, the people who are living there um, are being pressured, feel pressured to speak out in support of the government, or unless they receive retributions too. Unless they receive retributions like Bishop Anagbe of McCurdy Diocese in Benue did when his home village was attacked in May and 12 of his relatives killed. So there's fear and there's corruption. So it's a whole array of things we don't know really precisely. But I have talked to some in the church who were against CPC. They said, oh, no, we don't want it. Some do, some don't. Also, it's, we should be clear that we're not arguing genocide of Christians. Nigeria is a massive country. It's the most populous country in Africa. And that's why it makes it so serious when there are tens of thousands of Christians being killed over a period of a decade or so, and 19,000 churches destroyed. It's the largest country, the most populous country, the biggest economy in Africa, in Africa. And it will affect, whatever it does will affect the region. It's going to influence it. And it's going to influence in a bad way if this continues. And it could devolve into a failed state, which would be disastrous.
The saying in Africa, isn't it, as Nigeria goes, Africa goes?
Yes, that's correct.
So, Nina, I want to do a whole show with you on Nigeria. VPP, most of our work is in Nigeria. We don't, but for the very reason that you said, we can't really talk about much of what we do in Nigeria because it would undermine what we're trying to do, which is to make communities more secure. But I want to go from Nigeria now to China because with the arrest of Pastor Jin, we're seeing the CCP become really brazen in their persecution of Christians, almost as if they're doing this to gain leverage over the Trump administration, or I don't know what its intent is. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I also want to thank you because it's been your writings on the CCP's persecution of the church that led our organization, I think now almost 2 years ago, we launched freeourbishops.com.
That's right. I remember those cards that you had made up.
We still are promoting it all over the country and all over the world. Yeah. And that's really thanks to you and your research and your writing.
Well, thank you.
And it's been frustrating to us because we thought, wow, people are going to, when they find out about this, they're going to become incensed. But a lot of times it's like banging your head against a wall. And then now I want to ask you a twofold question, and I'm just going to let you go. But it seems like there is a more brazen attack on Christians in a way designed to undermine or challenge the Trump administration. Maybe I'm wrong on this. And how does like the arrest of Pastor Jin fit in with the broader systematic war on religion? Ambassador Brownback said when he went to China in the last Trump administration that the CCP is waging a war on religion. And he told them they were going to lose that war, which the CCP will lose that war. But how does this arrest fit in with harvesting and genocide of Uyghurs, harvesting of their organs, the brutality against the Falun Dafa practitioners? How does this fit into that? And is this a direct challenge to the Trump administration?
I think it's all of that. I mean, it certainly is par for the course on the approach of the Chinese Communist Party towards religion. They want to repress it. They want to control it. They have held back until now, really held back compared to what they've done to the Uyghurs, which is a genocide, been declared a genocide, or the Tibetans, which probably should be a genocide, as well as Falun Gong, who is a thoroughly Chinese religion. And where they are saying that they, experienced mass forced organ harvesting. And I've reviewed that material and agree with them. So now they have, there's been some forbearance with the Christians because China wanted Western trade desperately. And they wanted to get strong. They wanted their military to get strong and dominate the rest of the world and dominate our military. So They had a hands-off approach to the Christians for the most part. They started decapitating the Catholic Church around 2018 in a more serious, systematic way. Anyone who didn't join the church association that they created called the Patriotic Association, which is part of the Chinese Communist Party. It's under it's supervised directly by the United Front Work Department. They started going after them in a very systematic way, those bishops that held out. They didn't want the communist government of China determining their teachings or banning children from their churches, which it does, which the government does to the patriotic churches. They wanted to remain independent.
Can you stop it real quick, Nina? I want you to hit that point. I'm glad you mentioned that. I think most people don't understand. The patriotic churches are not allowed to catechize children, right? Till 18.
It's against the law, yes, to catechize children, to have any kind of exposure to religion whatsoever. They can't go to mass. They can't receive the sacraments. They can't get baptized. They can't get confirmed. They can't go to Bible school. So children cannot have any exposure. And if you allow children to have exposure, your church will be banned. So,
and what I learned from your research and writing, many of these bishops that have been disappeared did horrible things like give aid and care to orphans, discarded children, and provided them with this education. And these very holy, pious priests and bishops vanish.
That's right. Or were detained in isolation for decades. And so that's still going on. The Protestant churches, for the most part, they started taking down some crosses. They started demolishing some of them in 2018. They arrested a very famous pastor, Wang Yi, of Covenant Rain Church, Early Rain Church, in 2018. But they sort of died down. They diverted their attention from the Protestant churches, and that's what it's called there. There's just one big Protestant church, non-denominational in China by law, and they turned. They made a U-turn in this month in October. They suddenly arrested the most prominent pastor in the country. Pastor Ezra Jin. I work with his son-in-law. He's at Hudson Institute, and I met the daughter and the family. So, very sweet people. But this pastor has to be in the underground, to not join the Patriotic Church, because he did not want this kind of communist control where you have to build your sermons around the sayings of the president, Xi Jinping. In addition to keeping out children, and many other requirements as well, like cameras in your sanctuary. He refused to have the cameras in his sanctuary. So they started harassing him. He then made his churches smaller and more underground, that is more secret. And he started a network in 40 different cities throughout China, and did a lot of his preaching and spreading the gospel on the internet. And for that, he has been charged. He was arrested earlier this month. We're bracing for his indictment any day now, probably this week. And he could get a very long sentence. We've been trying to raise awareness about his case so that doesn't happen. But I'm not that optimistic. Jason, you raise a very, very interesting question about why now. Now, part of me thinks it's a continuation, a consolidation of power by Xi Jinping. He's purging or somebody's purging the military, 9 top posts in the military. And, it's a very opaque system, so we don't really know what's going on. It could be a power struggle. It could be that he's consolidating power. He's certainly consolidating power over religion, and it's gotten far more intense for the Protestants now, and for everyone, for every religion across the board. And now they're cracking down. This is a major crackdown, the worst crackdown in 40 years. um, against this network of churches, of the biggest network of church Protestant churches in China. Um, it's He has been charged. Pastor Ezra has been charged with illegally disseminating information on the internet. So this is Christian information that he's talking about. And for that, he could get years imprisonment. There was another Protestant pastor who got out last year. He served 18 years. He was American, but he's American Chinese. He always lived in China, but his family was American. And he served 18 years. His health was broken. And he got out because President Trump, I think it was President Trump, no, I guess it was President Biden, traded him for a Chinese spy. So, President Trump is scheduled to meet with Xi Jinping at the end of this month in South Korea. It's an APEC meeting, a sidebar meeting there. It's uncertain whether that meeting is going to take place because of the rare earth mineral dispute. But yes, that's all in the mix. All of that's in the mix about why this guy was, this pastor was arrested. They used human beings like that as bargaining chips.
That's what totalitarian regimes do.
Yeah, it's a hostage, basically.
And why they despise religion is we have a transcendent reference point.
That's right. That's right.
We see every human person as an end in themselves.
That's right.
I'll be blunt. I hate this expression, Christian nationalism. And I was texting with a very influential person in the Trump administration all day yesterday about this expression. And I said, by Christian nationalism, you mean that I am a Christian and a member of a nation, and that I want my people to be godly, and I want to leverage the state to serve the common good. And as a Christian, I want to work to expand the kingdom of God. Sure. But if you mean by Christian nationalist, I leverage my faith as an instrument of the state, well, then that's disgusting and reprehensible to me. Now we have an administration. You and I both have a lot of friends in this administration. Your organization is a very influential and well-respected organization. What if we can't put pressure on the Trump administration to work for the persecuted church around the world, what can we ever do? So what would you suggest for those of us out here? What can we do? What would you say to policymakers? And what would you say to those of us who are just voters? What can we do as Christians? As we suffer, they suffer. As we celebrate, they should celebrate. And yet we don't feel the suffering of the persecuted church, and we definitely don't work for the persecuted church. So what can we do to serve this pastor, who you're friends with his family, to get him freed? What can we do so that children in China can be catechized? Because if American Christians can't do anything, no one can. Because we're the most powerful Christians on the face of the earth.
That's right. We do have a lot of leverage. And we're a democracy. So I think that the churches here, the Christians here, should be praying for them, first of all, should educate themselves about their names. And there's a lot written by about Pastor Jin. Just go to the Hudson website. You'll see it.
I'll put the link in.
Oh, great. Thank you. And then to contact your member of Congress and raise your voices to let them know that you want them to support bills that protect against Christian persecution. There's one in the Senate on Nigeria that Ted Cruz introduced last month. There's one in the House that, again, Congressman Chris Smith introduced this year. And they don't have any co-sponsors right now. So that's an important thing. Those are both on Nigeria. But on China specifically, take to your social media circles, your church circles, your social circles, and start talking about your concern about the Christians who are being persecuted in China. You can mention Pastor Ezra or you can mention Catholic bishops persecuted in China. But just by saying persecuted religious in China gets across the point to your elected officials, including
And
President
you know
Trump.
your district. If you're in Houston, you bring up Pastor Ezra. If you're in New Orleans, you bring up the
Right.
bishop. But we
Right.
need to know. Speaking of bishops, I know your time is short and we're coming up on 30 minutes, and I promise you only half hour. But I think there's two things that Vulnerable People Project is prioritizing over the next 12 months in relationship to the CCP. We're launching a campaign next week on, leading up to the anniversary of the Berlin Wall coming down, asking President Trump to tear down the firewall. I
Yeah,
think
it's very
if
important.
we tore down the firewall, the CCP would be hard pressed to maintain its oppression of the people of China. Number one. Number two, the Pope Leo, my homie, we're from the same neighborhood. My first job was his favorite pizza place, so that
Oh,
has to be a good guy. He cannot renew this secret a
deal.
deal with the CCP
Yeah.
that was brokered by a disgraced pervert, Cardinal McCarrick. How, to those things, do you have any thoughts on how do we get the Trump administration to prioritize tearing down this firewall? And how do we get the bishops not to renew this perverse deal with the corrupt state?
Yeah, they're both extremely strategic actions points that I commend you for. On this secret deal, the CCP pretends to give the Pope a say in appointing his own leadership and his own bishops in China. And the Pope pretends that the CCP has given him this power. We saw it again with Pope Leo just this month, where he validated, gave his blessing to a bishop that was appointed by the CCP during the interregnum after Pope Francis's death, before Pope Leo was elected. So, this was completely one-sided, and the church goes along with this. This is not good. It's basically a falsehood. It's a fake agreement. There is no agreement. It's a legal fiction, and it's harming the church. It's harming the church in China, but it's also harming the brand, if you will, by not standing up for truth.
Pope Leo said, I admire him, we need to get politics out of the church.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously transcends politics. Well, I think the single most simple step to remove politics from within the Catholic Church is not to allow the Communist Party of China to choose our bishops.
Right. That's absolutely essential. Not only do they choose their bishops, but then they plant their own. They plant their own communist apparatchiks into the positions, like the Shen Bin, the bishop in Shanghai. He believes in the party should control the church. I mean, he has says things like that, and he was not selected by the Pope. He appointed himself. The Pope waited 3 months. This is Pope Francis. He waited 3 months after the communists had installed him to give his blessing, which he said he did for the sake of harmony. But this is he had this Chinese Patriotic Bishops Conference, the Bishop of Shanghai, and the Vatican. No Pope has ever recognized that as a Catholic institution, because it requires those who join to renounce the authority of the Pope. I mean, it's just counterintuitive, and that's why Cardinal Zen was so opposed to it. And this Secretary of State of the Vatican, Cardinal Parolin, has been there for quite a while. He's the architect of the agreement, and I think that Pope Leo needs his own man. Fresh eyes to look at this agreement and to say, what are we getting out of it? And, maybe you have to play along with it, but the important thing is to start an underground. They need to maintain the underground. The Catholic Church knows how to do that. They do that they did it in Ukraine for many years during in Eastern Europe, other places in Eastern Europe during the Cold War. They used to do it in China. And the Protestants have done that to great effect. Their churches have really skyrocketed in numbers until now. And they need to go back to really having, the priests, being underground means that the priests may not um, wear a clerical collar on the streets. It's that simple, to just um, try to educate the children. I really don't know, Jason, who's going to be the next generation or two of priests in China, because if children can't ever be exposed to religion until they're 18, and if the church goes along with this, which it has in the Vatican approved patriotic churches, bishops, why would anyone go into the priesthood? The children need to understand what the importance of religion and grow up in it to really want to be a priest, to make that sacrifice.
And that's clearly the CCP's plan.
Yes, that's the plan. And so I think that's extremely important to challenge that and to let the Pope know that we don't like it. We don't like it when they're obfuscating the problems of the church has, the persecution. Cardinal Parolin denied there was any persecution when he was asked at a press conference a couple of years ago. So
he went to an organ harvesting convention and said that it was the best example of Catholic social teaching in action. This is horrific stuff.
It is.
You know what I think, Nina, is one of the problems, which is going to maybe sound counterintuitive and offend my audience, which I probably offend my audience a lot. But I think the church in the West has swallowed the woke lie about what Christianity is. It is not a European religion. It is not even a Western religion. It is the religion of the West, which comes from the East. The church.
That is so true. Yes. Communism's a Western ideology, not
right.
Christianity.
The Christians in the Middle East and the Christians in Africa and the Christians in China, I think we have not internalized that they are the living stones, that they are members of the mystical body of Christ. They are our brothers and sisters. And not that we don't care. You and I both have written and worked very hard for other religious communities. But the truth is, Fulton Sheen, the great Bishop Fulton Sheen said two things. I'm going to give you two Fulton Sheen quotes. One is, he said, the foundation of solidarity in the world is when one Christian in one part of the world shows love for another Christian in the world. That's the foundation. Our love doesn't stop at our fellow believers. And the other thing that Fulton Sheen wrote in his book on missions in the early 1950s, which was really profound, which I don't think in some of the reactionary elements in the church today, they could speak this freely because we've been so embroiled in a war for orthodoxy. But Fulton Sheen said that when the gospel spreads across China, there will be a doctor of the church that arises that will do with Confucius what Thomas Aquinas did with Aristotle. And he said, since the Enlightenment, the church in the West has severed itself from the transcendent, and Asia has severed itself from the immanent. But when the gospel spreads to Asia, the transcendent, the immanent can fully infuse the body of Christ. And so as Christians, it's very important we share the gospel, and it's very important that you and I are the ones that live in the cream. We are the ones that are blessed with influence, with wealth, with power, but it's not ours.
It's up to us to speak out for them. Yeah.
Yes. And you, Nina, have been like the greatest example of that in your life. And so I just want to thank you for that.
You've done your share too, Jason. And, I pray for you in Nigeria and all the dangerous places. I remember when you were in Afghanistan. I mean, these are some of the most dangerous places in the world for Christians and others, other living things. But I can't compete with Fulton Sheen. I mean, those were beautiful words. And maybe I should just leave it at that. But I think that we really need to be factual about what's happening and have, you can't have good policies unless you have good analysis. That's what we say in Washington. And so it's important to understand what's really going on. And for, the Secretary of State of the Vatican to go around and say there's no persecution of Christians in Nigeria. That's what he said yesterday. At a rollout of the Aid to the Church in Needs annual report on world persecution, in which completely contradicted their findings on Nigeria, is unacceptable. And he said the same thing about China, and it's just not true. It's covering up.
You were at the International Religious Freedom Conference 2 years ago. Nancy Pelosi, Antony Blinken, everyone was talking about CCP persecution of the church. Cardinal Dolan, God bless him, I consider him a friend, was the only speaker that did not address the persecution of the church in China. Mm-hmm. And it is a scandal that we just don't at least acknowledge the suffering of our co-religionists. It's a scandal.
It is a scandal, and to have someone like Bill Maher speak about it, and suddenly it catches fire. It's a prairie fire after he says a throwaway line about Nigeria and genocide of Christians. I mean, God bless him for that. But you're right. Are very few. Archbishop Corleone in San Francisco, he's spoken out on these issues, both in China and in Nigeria. And as Bishop Barron has as well. But we need more of our bishops.
We do. Well, Nina, thank you so much. How do people follow your writing? Everyone who listens to this show would want to read everything you write. So how do we follow you?
My writing's all posted on our website at hudson.org/Nina Shea. So on the expert page there, I can be found. Thank you so much, Jason. I really appreciate you shining this spotlight.
I'm going to be in D.C. in 2 weeks with our director of Nigerian operations is flying in from Nigeria. So hopefully maybe we can make a meeting and get to see you.
That'd be great.
All right. I'm going to land the plane. You get back to work.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks so much.
That is the great Nina Shea, one of my heroes, someone I've looked up to for over almost 2 decades since I first met her. I'm going to put the link to her writing in the show notes. And if you are concerned about the persecuted church around the world, then you need to go to vulnerablepeopleproject.com, because we stand with the most persecuted people in the world, most vulnerable communities in the world. Most of them are Christians, tragically. Can you imagine? From Nigeria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, the West Bank, Gaza, into China, VPP is there. Go to our website, vulnerablepeopleproject.com. Look around, see what we do, and become a donor. And when you donate to us, you will be standing in solidarity with the most vulnerable people in the world. And I challenge you, if you look at our website, if you go peek and you go look around, if this is the first time you've come across the show, you're going to want to become a donor. You're going to want to stand with us. You're also going to want to read every single thing Nina Shea writes. So go into the show notes and click that link and make sure you follow Nina Shea. All right, guys, until next time, this has been the Jason Jones Show with the great Nina Shea.